All right, so I want to talk about Joe Biden making the decision to not hold MBS, who is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, accountable for directing the murder and dismemberment of a U.S. resident and Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, years ago. So this is something that isn't really new information. There was a report that was dropped by the Biden administration that was just confirming what everybody kind of already knew to be true, which is that MBS directly ordered the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and therefore should be held responsible in a lot of people's eyes. But Joe Biden has decided to effectively take a similar stance to what Donald Trump was doing and kind of sort of just ignore the fact that he ordered the killing and dismemberment of a U.S. resident and journalist. So this has a two-part kind of story to this, which is one, what should be the direct accountability for MBS himself, and the second one is kind of like recalibrating our overall relationship with the Saudis and asking the basic question of, hey, why are we in bed with the Saudis? Why are we selling weapons to the Saudis? Why are we to this country that has a obviously horrific human rights record, to a country that is effectively conducting a genocide in Yemen that we have actually helped facilitate? Why are we in bed with this country? And so I want to point out some of the things that people have been saying and criticizing on Joe Biden's stance on this issue. First, let me show you exactly what he actually is doing to take steps for accountability in this. So the Treasury Department sanctioned Ahmad Hassan Mohammed al-Asari, Saudi Arabia's former deputy head of General Intelligence Presidency and Saudi Arabia's Rapid Intervention Force. The move freezes any assets that the individuals held in the U.S. and prohibits any person from the U.S. from handling them. Those involved in the abhorrent killing of Jamal Khashoggi must be held accountable. The United States stands united with journalists and political dissidents in opposing threats of violence and intimidation, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said in a statement. Apparently, yeah, they want to hold everybody accountable except for the guy who actually ordered it. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced that the Khashoggi ban on Friday, which consists of visa restrictions for 76 Saudi individuals believed to have been engaged in threatening dissidents overseas, including but not limited to the Khashoggi killing. Quote, we have introduced and announced a new policy that will apply the State Department's ability to restrict and revoke visas to any individuals believed to be involved in the extraterritorial activities targeting perceived dissidents or journalists trying to harass them, surveil them, harm them, or their families. So again, apparently this applies to everybody except the guy at the top, except for MBS, who is really mostly responsible for this, for ordering it. So here are some of these responses that we've been seeing. So President Joe Biden came under fire from political leaders and human rights defenders worldwide over the weekend for failing to directly sanction or rebuke Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman over the brutal assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by the Saudi government hit squad in 2018. Mohammed bin Salman is guilty of murder, wrote the editorial board for the Washington Post. Again, Khashoggi was a journalist for the Washington Post, where Khashoggi worked late Friday night. Quote, Biden should not give him a pass, they stated. That heinous crime against a permanent U.S. resident and contributing columnist to the Post should not go unpunished. Under U.S. law, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as he is widely known, ought to be banned from travel to the United States and subjected to an asset freeze. That President Biden has chosen not to pursue that course suggests that the fundamental change he promised in U.S.-Saudi relations will not include holding to account its reckless ruler who consequently is unlikely to be deterred from further criminal behavior. So that promise that they're talking about there that Joe Biden made on the campaign trail, this is essentially what he was saying while he was campaigning to be president. And notice the difference here because it really is amazing. Foreign policy took center stage in Wednesday night's Democratic debate with former Vice President Joe Biden saying that he would not sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, making a sharp contrast with the Obama administration and stressing that he would make the Saudis pay the price for their killing of the Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi. Quote, I would make it very clear to them that we are not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. That's a very strong, definitive stance that I actually would agree with, but he obviously has not taken this step. Biden said, we are going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. Biden also said that there is very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia, and in reference to Yemen, said that he would end the sale of material to the Saudis where they were going to and murdering children. Okay, so basically he did kind of, in a little bit of a way, follow through on that campaign promise for ending U.S. support of the Saudi-led genocide in Yemen. it was kind of a half-measured, weaselly step that he took, because he said, well, we're going to be ending our offensive support for the genocide in Yemen. But, you know, to me, as somebody who like frequently looks at the way that they phrase some of these foreign policy issues, to me that means it could mean anything, basically. I mean, the United States will classify any military action as defensive, as we just saw with Joe Biden bombing the shit out of Syria illegally and unconstitutionally. Again, even though it is illegal and unconstitutional in a country that we illegally invaded, somehow the U.S. still justifies that as like a defensive strike. So to me, that says that you're not really taking it seriously. If you wanted to actually completely remake our relationship with the Saudis, you would not even be providing any logistical support for what they're doing in Yemen right now. But he hasn't taken that firm of a stance. He just said ending offensive support. So we'll have to see how that actually plays out. But contrast what this entire statement is with the actions that he actually took. Biden administration never even asked state to draft a hypothetical option for sanctioning Saudi Arabia's crown prince, per CNN. The administration did not even request the State Department to work up options on how to target MBS with sanctions. So contrast those two things that we just read. When he's on the campaign trail, he's saying we're going to end all of our weapons deals with Saudi Arabia. We're going to make them the pariah that they are, which is good. And by the way, I wouldn't support something like U.S. involvement in regime change in Saudi Arabia. I don't want there to be such a drastic turnaround where it's like, okay, suddenly the United States wants to do a little bit of a coup here and there in Saudi Arabia. I wouldn't support something like that, but accurately making them and portraying them as the pariah that they legitimately are, like Joe Biden said on the campaign trail, I think would be a good thing, because they literally are. We know the actions that they take. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest funders of terrorism around the Middle East and around the world. They fund radical jihadist groups that do violence all over the Middle East. So with that, and again, combination with what they're doing in Yemen, in combination with the fact that they dismembered and murdered a U.S. resident and Washington Post journalist, you really have to be asking these fundamental questions of why the fuck are we in bed with these people? Again, just because what? They give us good oil deals, or because they're a geopolitical deterrent to Iran, or that it makes us feel safer in that region with our pressure on Iran? Is that really the justification? I mean, is that going to be the bar for us to get in bed with a country like that? I don't think it should be. And Ro Khanna doesn't either. And I think this is a really good clip that basically summarizes the entire situation. So let's go ahead and watch what he had to say.
Why are some critical that the Biden administration isn't doing more on this?
They need to do more. Alex, here is the what is so outrageous about this. It's not just that MBS ordered basically the brutal assassination of a journalist. We have to dig deeper into why he ordered that assassination. It's because Khashoggi was exposing the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, where thousands are dying, women and children are dying, and the Saudis continue to be involved. President Biden has taken a strong measure to at least say we're not going to be aiding the offensive campaign there. For 5 years, we were unfortunately complicit in that campaign, and the president has taken a good direction. But I think there has to be higher accountability. I don't think MBS should be allowed in the United States, and we need to be stopping our weapon sales to the Saudis.
So those things can still come, though, right? I mean, there's nothing that's preventing that from happening in the future. And I spoke with former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, earlier, and he said, you know, diplomacy has to be taken into account, how difficult these kinds of top-level negotiations are, particularly with a country like Saudi Arabia, with whom we have a very interesting, to put it mildly, history, and their role as a player on the global stage. Is there a chance that progressives and those who are pushing for more to be done to hold Saudi Arabia, if not MBS, personally accountable, is there a chance that you can say, look, we understand it's very complicated. We're going to give you some time to get this done, and we expect more in the future?
I have tremendous admiration for Ambassador McFaul. The challenge here is what's going on in Yemen. So if for 5 years, there's been a war where there may be the largest famine in Yemen, and some of us have been trying to stop the United States involvement. I want to say that President Biden has done the right thing there, but we need to, at the very least, get the blockade lifted. We need to tell the Saudis to stop pouring money into Yemen. I understand this is complex diplomatically, but I guess what progressives believe is that we lead with human rights. Mm-hmm. We don't lead with a calculation of balance of power politics.
Right. So I mean, that ending statement that he just said there is pretty much the perfect summary, right? If you're somebody who cares more about leading with human rights issues and actually giving a shit about some of the terrible stuff that they are responsible for and that we have been complicit in doing, then you should probably support some strong actions against MBS himself personally, and even maybe against Saudi Arabia. Again, the reasons for why we should not be in bed with the Saudis is just a massive and extensive list. And if you understand the history of how we originally got involved with them, I mean, we have really no justification for continuing to support and continuing to be in bed with this country that refuses to abide by basic human rights rules, and it won't even back off from killing a U.S. resident. I mean, that's something that I don't think that you can just let slide. And like he was saying, or like the journalist was asking the question of, well, maybe Biden can do something in the future, maybe, and I am perfectly willing to stand corrected if he does end up taking a stronger stance. But listen, we already knew the facts of this case really before this report was released. It's not as if Biden's team has to be sitting around coming up with ways to hold him accountable. This is something you could have figured out while you were campaigning. And in fact, like that statement that Joe Biden that we just read, he actually did. He did have a plan for holding him accountable, and he just hasn't followed through on it. So that's a bit of an excuse to me. We'll wait and see if he actually does take more actions. But as of right now, totally inadequate response from Joe Biden's administration on this issue.